Last week it was Germany, now it's the Netherlands. Turkey's president is again infuriated as some Turkish government ministers have been barred from campaigning in Europe. How far will the referendum row go? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem, Sika. Nazi remnants and fascists is how Turkey's president describes the Dutch government and is promising retaliation. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is furious because two Turkish government ministers were barred from holding political rallies in the Netherlands. The Turkish Family Affairs Minister was turned away from speaking at an event in Rotterdam and escorted back to the German border. Dutch authorities also prevented Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu from flying to Rotterdam for the rally. Dutch police dispersed protesters at the Turkish consulate in Rotterdam. The Dutch government saying foreign political rallies are banned by law and public disorder would be threatened days before the general election in the Netherlands. Erdogan wanted to drum up support among the 300,000 Turkish expatriates there that are eligible to vote in next month's referendum on constitutional reforms. A yes vote could see the president strengthen his grip on power.
They don't know anything about politics or international diplomacy. They are very nervous and they are cowards. They are Nazi remnants, they are fascists. You can ban our foreign ministers' planes as much as you want. Let's see how your planes come to Turkey from now on. I'm talking about diplomatic flights here, not about citizens' flights. That's a separate issue.
The decision that the Netherlands took is a scandal in every way, and it cannot be accepted. It doesn't fit the diplomatic tradition. Unfortunately, Europe and several countries in Europe, the Netherlands being in the first place, they're reminding Europe of World War II. The same racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism. We see all the crimes against humanity in today's politics. And of course, this step taken by the Netherlands will have a response.
Now, less than a week ago, Erdogan also accused the German government of what he called Nazi practices after Turkey's foreign minister was barred from a political rally in Germany last week.
We will voice all of this at international meetings. We will voice all of this to our friends. We will make them lose face before the world. Democracy is a system that takes power from inside and reflects it outwards, not inwardly reserved. We do not want to see the Nazi world. We do not want to see practices of those fascist regimes. I thought Germany had abandoned these practices long ago, but apparently I was wrong.
Well, the Dutch diplomatic row has the potential to threaten relations between Turkey and the European Union, as well as NATO allies. Talks for Turkey to join the EU began 12 years ago, but negotiations have been slow-moving. Last March, the EU and Turkey reached a deal to try and stop the influx of refugees, particularly from Syria. That was in return for economic aid to Turkey and a promise of visa-free travel for Turks travelling to the EU. Following the failed coup in Turkey last July, the European Parliament urged governments to freeze EU membership talks. Since the coup, thousands of Turkish civil servants have been fired, soldiers, police, journalists and academics arrested, as well as media organizations shut down. Well, let's now get the thoughts of our guests. Joining us from Istanbul, we have Metin Atmaca. He is a professor at Ankara University. In Amsterdam via Skype, Joost Lagendijk. He is an independent political analyst and former member of the European Parliament. And joining us from Berlin, Ulrich Breukner, Jean Monnet Professor in European Studies at Stanford University. Welcome all of you. Metin Atmaca, there are many people in Turkey and among the Turkish diaspora in Europe who will doubtless support Erdogan's position on this, even if they don't perhaps support the man himself. But this is the second time in a week the Turkish president has used the Nazi jibe against a European government. Is that kind of language helpful in this debate?
Well, it may not be helpful in terms of diplomacy, but it's definitely helpful in terms of gaining more and more support from the Turkish voters in Europe. Since the last elections we had in 2015, at least 55% to 60% of the voters were for the governing party of AK party. So at the moment, as we see for the referendums, the yes supporters in the government and in Turkey are trying to mobilize these votes further and further in order to basically to come up with a 50% threshold in Turkey. So kind of we see from Turkey that the voters in Europe probably might be the key votes in terms of passing this threshold. So in terms of that, basically the government officials and the yes supporters are basically trying to use every means to get these votes in Europe. That's why definitely.
But what does it say? What does it say, Metin Atmaca, about the character of this debate that the Turkish president feels he can get support among Turks by referring to or comparing European governments to the Nazis?
Yeah, I mean, this is the way that especially President Erdogan, someone say it's a political language that he used. I mean, in Turkey we are kind of used to it, but in Europe they may not be used to it. And so the closer he comes to the elections, the further he used the such extreme language in terms of rallying the voters for his side. So this is the process that he's actually coming to. I mean, as I said, I mean, there is a month or so for the referendum, and he's kind of worried probably about the yes and no threshold. So he's kind of trying to use these language in terms of getting more support from Europe. But that means that, I mean, as at the moment he found kind of a golden opportunity actually by attacking more and more European countries in terms of that, and he is using cleverly his position in terms of getting more support not only from Europe but also in Turkey as well.
Joost Lagendijk, how's all this being seen in the Dutch political arena right now, with the parliamentary elections just a couple of days away and the rising popularity as well of the far-right leader Geert Wilders and his anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant rhetoric?
Let me start by saying that this comparison between the Dutch and the Nazis or fascists is a despicable comparison. I mean, nobody in the Netherlands, be they right, center or left, understands why we are being compared with fascists or Nazis, because we don't want Turkish ministers to campaign in the Netherlands. So this has gone down extremely badly, I would say. It's ununderstandable. Nobody understands why President Erdogan came up with these kind of comparisons. Having said that, of course, we're in quite a complicated situation. As you said, we will have elections in the Netherlands in 4 days, March 15. And Turkey has been a controversial issue for some time now. I think over the last 2 to 3 years, the distance between Turkey on the one hand and the Netherlands on the other has deepened. I would say almost all Dutch politicians have started to grow a definite dislike of Mr. Erdogan and his policies, a feeling that Turkey is sliding from a democracy to an autocracy. So there's very little sympathy. There was already very little sympathy for Mr. Erdogan before this row started. Then there was the question whether Turkish ministers could campaign in the Netherlands. And then the government decided not to allow that. Personally, I feel that it was a mistake. I feel that I'm convinced that even the freedom of speech relates to everybody. Even if you don't agree with what somebody says, I think the Turkish minister should have had a chance to come to the Netherlands and make his points known. But okay, the Dutch government didn't want that to happen, and that is so strongly linked to these upcoming elections, where many people, many politicians were afraid that Mr. Wilders, the extreme right populist who was doing quite well in the opinion polls but is not doing that well anymore, would make Turkey, this visit of the Turkish minister, an issue in the elections. And the Dutch government simply didn't want to do that. That started a diplomatic row with Turkey, where there was escalation, provocation, especially from the Turkish side. And that's why we ended up in this deplorable situation.
But on the far-right leader, Geert Wilders, he's been gaining some popularity on this nationalistic, anti-Islamic platform, and he's already claiming credit for what's happened here, saying that the pressure from his supporters led to the government's action. So I guess my question then would be, does the Dutch government risk kind of promoting his agenda and doing his bidding?
No, I don't think so. The calculation by the Dutch government is as follows. If the Netherlands would allow a Turkish minister to speak here in the Netherlands and make a case for the proposal that Mr. Erdogan is pushing in the referendum, it would be used by Mr. Wilders to make a point and to say, why are we allowing this guy to come? He is himself anti-Turkish, he's anti-Muslim, he's anti-Islam. So this would be, in a way, an electoral present to him. So in order to prevent that, I think all parties, all major parties at least, including those in the government, decided not to give this present to Mr. Wilders, unite and not allow the Turkish minister to come to the Netherlands. I would say this is not taking over Mr. Wilders' agenda, but it's definitely trying to prevent Mr. Wilders of using this visit or a potential visit in the electoral campaign for the elections in 4 days.
All right, Ulrich Breukner, the Dutch government's explanation for preventing the two ministers from attending the rallies was, as we said at the top there, first of all, an issue of public safety, but they're also objecting to what they see as foreign nations carrying out political events on their soil. But in the case of Erdogan, is there more to it than that? I mean, it's no secret that many European countries are concerned by what they see as increasing authoritarianism in Turkey, and that they don't want to do anything that's going to help Erdogan win this referendum. What's your view on that?
Well, it is a general trend in countries of the European Union to be concerned about what's happening in Turkey. And I think the reason why Turkey received the status of a candidate country for EU membership was decided exactly to make Turkey more like us and to support a secular trend and a pro-European and open society-oriented movement in Turkey to reach the level of becoming a European state, no matter where they are geographically located, to be ready to join the European Union. What we have seen since 2002 is that this was an announcement, but what happened since then is far from being the democratic standard that a candidate country needs to fulfill to become a member of the European Union. So all the responses we have seen now in various forms try to highlight the fact that our understanding of what is a Western-type democracy is not fulfilled in Turkey, and no one is willing to just wave it through and allow, in the name of tolerance, things like this to happen in Turkey.
But there is this perception, though, that this action by the Dutch government and the German government is playing into Erdogan's hands, because he is now being seen as a kind of champion of Turks, and that this will give him further support in the referendum. What do you say to that?
Well, I think this is a fight you cannot win. If you give the floor to someone who presents anti-democratic authoritarian visions as the future of the political system in Turkey, then you violate your own understanding of what is freedom and what is your understanding of democracy. If you do not allow him to give a chance to express his opinion in a pluralist understanding of freedom is always the freedom of the other, then you violate your principles by restricting freedom rights. So similar to what we just heard about the case in the Netherlands, in which Wilders could exploit a decision for or against an opportunity to speak in the Netherlands, it's a similar situation here with the execution of freedom rights.
Metin Atmaca, what's your view on that? I mean, is Erdogan going to be seen as benefiting from this perception that European countries are trying to interfere in Turkey's election? Oh, sorry, not Turkish election, Turkish referendum, rather.
No, I mean, from Turkey's, we don't see such a way. But then again, as of today, from the news that I have seen, basically the government officials have positioned most of these European countries who are bearing the the Turkish ministers coming into as the supporters of the no in terms of referendum, I mean, opposing to them. So, I mean, as I said, these are kind of political opportunities they are trying to play with in terms of supporting it. But when we look at the public opinion, I mean, still there is a huge support for getting into European Union. I mean, the Turks don't see such a way that the Europe is playing with the politics here. But on the other hand, when we see that the Europeans are playing with such a way that bearing the Turks coming in there and then voting for, we see a different kind of playing with the populism, not the popular vote. So there's kind of a populism going on in some of the European countries that are trying to limit on the one hand of the nationalist movements, but on the other hand, actually, it's this playing with such a way of with the Muslims and Turkish immigrants is kind of playing for the nationals itself. I mean, Geert Wilders probably, I mean, it's at the moment it's neck and neck in terms of having support, but probably such a way of approaching by the Netherlands to the Turkish officials will help him to get more and more votes. So it's kind of between populism and popular support way of going on and off.
Joost Lagendijk, you're shaking your head there.
I mean, as I explained, the fact that there will be an election in 4 days has definitely influenced the decision of the government and of political parties. But let's not be naive. One of my main problems with the way they reacted is that they are in fact playing Erdogan's game. Because Mr. Erdogan is on purpose provoking Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, other European countries, because he knows very well, and he's a master of this game, that raising tensions between Turkey and the European countries and the European Union is benefiting him in the upcoming referendum in Turkey. I'm sure that he would love to have this kind of confrontations in the next couple of weeks leading up to April 16, because he's definitely using it. We have seen it this weekend, we have seen it last week, in pumping up Turkish nationalism, saying that, look, our nation is being besieged by these European hypocrites and fascists. We should unite behind a yes vote, very clearly using this to pump up his yes votes. And that is why I think we shouldn't have done this, because we're in fact, the Netherlands and all those countries refusing Turkish ministers to speak, we are basically helping Mr. Erdogan in his campaign to win the April 16 referendum.
Ulrich Breukner, if we continue to see more of these diplomatic rows between Turkey and European countries, doesn't it risk as well that the dispute could end up threatening the European Union deal with Turkey that's stemming the flow of migrants, which is a critical issue, particularly in Germany, where more than 1 million of those migrants arrived over the past 2 years?
Well, first of all, I think this is something that should be separated. The one is we discuss this as a rational debate, that someone has a case in why he wants to change the constitutional setting in Turkey and makes a point. Apparently he doesn't make points, but he makes a lot of noise. And the noise allows him to mobilize people who are still undecided whether it's a good thing to vote yes or whether things should rather stay the same. So if he accepts to risk diplomatic problems with his #1 trade partners, then this is something that he can easily fix in a few weeks after the referendum, because it helps him to mobilize domestic support if he presents something like a terrible response that is Nazi-like in his understanding, which on the other hand allows us to discuss what Nazi-like actually means. It is, you have an understanding of democracy that the majority rules and there is no such thing like minority rights. You restrict the freedom of speech, you restrict the press, you streamline civil society institutions. If people become aware that this is not what democracy is all about, then the accusation has at least one positive effect. When it comes to the practical implications of the refugee deal, I think the biggest problem for the European Union and Germany in particular was that we were not ready for such a large number of asylum seekers coming at a short period of time after September 2015. Now things have changed. Germany is much better prepared. We have introduced a number of means, although we are far from having something like an integrated migration policy on a European level, but it's not as frightening, or the threat is not something as concrete as it could have been a year or a year and a half ago.
Metin, Atmaca, I want to ask you about the referendum itself, because that may partly explain why this is become such a contentious issue. Erdogan and his supporters say that this will allow decision making in the Turkish government to be more streamlined and more efficient, but opponents say it's just going to give the president more power and allow him to pursue a more authoritarian government. And under this referendum as well, it's going to allow Erdogan to, in theory, stay in power until the year 2029. What do you say to that?
I mean, in the last week's program, we already talked about part of it. I mean, until 2010, we had these military support kind of a system in Turkey. Afterwards, we were able to move on more democratically, and this is the first time that we are coming to a point that we will decide if we should have a stronger president or a weaker system vis-a-vis future military intervention. So, I mean, definitely the voters are still in between. I mean, there is a still undecided amount of people, probably more than 10%, and that's why there is a threshold in between yes and no to pass by. So in the end of these rally, probably by mid-April, we will see more decided voters if they want a stronger government that vis-a-vis the other bureaucratic as well as military establishment in Turkey, or a still more parliamentarian and divided system. So, I mean, it's not clear. People are still undecided that if they should have it or not. But I'm not sure if we will come to a point of an authoritarian regime, because in the end, people will decide on, and later on, we will see that if the new government will go to a point of a more authoritarian one, and if people will stand by and then try to rechange it again. I mean, this is all unanswered questions yet, so I can't say exactly.
Yeah, final word to you, Joost Lagendijk.
No, I mean, my problem with the proposals that are on the table now in Turkey is, on the one hand, the president will get an extended number of rights, and so he will be more or less a one-person rule. With extended, rights to nominate judges, to dissolve the parliament, etc. But my main problem is that, unlike other countries like the United States, where the president also has a lot of, rights to decide, Turkey doesn't have the necessary checks and balances anymore. In the United States, whatever you think of that, there's a strong independent judiciary. There is a critical media, and it's a federal country with strong rights for the independent states. In Turkey is a very centralized country. Erdogan has more or less destroyed the critical media, and there's no independent judiciary. So if there would be a yes vote in the referendum, we would have a one-man rule with a strong president, but unfortunately, without the checks and balances that you need in such a system.
That is going to have to be the last word. Thank you, Joost Lagendijk, Metin Atmaca and Ulrich Breutner. Thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you, as always, for watching. Remember, you can see this program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.